Here's why you should consider making mock scrapes sooner than what you typically do, more than likely. It's a clip from the Exodus podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Here we go.
First off, where are you putting these mock scrapes? I think
I'm going to get into that.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I figure so.
Our construction involves like from the type of tree to where it's at. It is a thorough process, and what we try to duplicate is the territory scrape. So our mock scrapes, it's very hard to duplicate a community scrape just because of the frequency of animals that are there, the diversity of scents that you have in there. When you go to create a mock scrape, at best, maybe you have 2, maybe 3 scents that you're putting on the ground. You know, that's if you're very, you go and you buy a couple different types of scents. But for us, we just rely on one scent that we put in the ground and on the licking branches. But before that even starts, you have to find the proper spot for it. And there's a couple different ways that we analyze where the location of a mock scrape goes. First, was there a scrape there last year? I mean, and you can read, even if it's a new farm, you can read if there was one there. Typically, you'll have low grass and foliage. Like sometimes it's even still bare after a full year. You know, it'll be barren. Oftentimes, the licking branches, if you will be broken. I mean, you can just tell that already. So if there was a scrape there last year, automatically you know, okay, the location is in a good spot. It's high traffic. The branches and the tree are doing something, you know, they're the right height, and the tree was a good tree because it was used already before. So it's checking boxes that you don't even have to realize. So that's sometimes a great spot to start a mock scrape. We're just trying to beat the deer there because now we're already putting it in, and they're going to hit it earlier and sooner and hopefully with more frequency rather than waiting for a deer to do it. So there's the one spot. But let's say you're on a farm and you want to create a brand new mock scrape. We really enjoy inside corners. We think that they generate a lot of traffic. Deer will hug timberlines quite a bit. And typically, I mean, if you think about where your field entrances and exits are, I bet you that a majority of them, or at least over half of them, are in the corners of fields. And it's just typically it's because there's old fence rows there, or because the farmer stopped because of a topography change, like farmers farm flat areas. So that's a good location. When you're looking for your tree, a lot of guys, I think, hang them a little higher than they need to. A deer stands lower head height than we do by quite a bit. So when we are looking for a proper licking branch height, we're really looking for like that low shoulder, that sternum area where you're working in front of you, not above you on the licking branches. When a deer approaches that scrape, he doesn't want to have to get on his hind legs. He doesn't really want to have to stick his head way up high to get his head in the scent, to apply his interdigital gland, his orbital gland. He doesn't want to have to really get up on his haunches. So you figured out that the height is relatively low, and then it goes to even the tree type. So a couple trees that we always avoid. There's 3 trees that we avoid, and that's hedge, that is locust, and that is walnut. So hedge and locust trees have thorns. Like if you were going to be shoving your head in a bush, you don't want it to be thorny, right? So we automatically put those to the wayside. And walnut is another one because walnut is very pungent. If you ever have picked up a walnut, or if you take walnut leaves and just rub them in your hand, it's extremely, extremely smelly. And so we find that deer don't want to have to compete with that because they're just putting a little bit of scent from their antlers and their face on there. And if you have a really, really aromatic tree like a walnut, it's going to mix and mince that scent up. So trees that we do like are mulberry trees, hackberry trees, and our favorite, without a doubt, are white oak. White oak is a great, great tree for this because the branches are extremely malleable. They're not brittle, so they can withstand a beating, and they bend, they don't break, and their leaves stay on forever. I mean, if you prune a white oak branch off and put it onto a mock scrape, I mean, you'll have those leaves stay on for months, I would say. So after we've picked out the tree, we identify corners are a good spot, or it's a location that we knew a scrape was at already. We recognize that it's a branch height that's accurate. It's a tree that we know deer are going to like to lick on and scrape on. Now we talk about the area underneath of it. You can start these as early as you want. We usually do it no earlier than Labor Day, and typically it's the second or third weekend after Labor Day is when we install our mock scrapes. But we're just, if we haven't already, you want to make sure and remove and trim the foliage as short as you can. So preemptively thinking about this in June or July, we'll go in and weed whack and sometimes even kill off a small plot, like with a backpack sprayer, just so that that is bare dirt by the time we apply, and there's been plenty of time for the herbicide to wash out. So you've trimmed it down. We take a garden rake and we'll expose the earth about the size of a dinner plate, maybe a dinner platter at the most. We'll make sure and keep it relatively level. We don't want to make a bowl or a pocket. We'll take any of the foliage that we raked out of it and we'll get it clear and far away so it doesn't enter the scrape again. We'll apply our scent to the scrape itself, and then we'll work the licking branches with another scent that we put on there, and we'll leave it be. And
so I guess let's say for someone on a farm that maybe there's not a lot of this scrape sign right now.
Yep.
What would you say to someone that's like, well, this all sounds great and dandy, but there's not necessarily a scrape line, or I'm not really sure to put a mock scrape. I understand inside corners, but are you trying to put it close to doe bedding, or where there's consistently daily deer traffic of, your doe family going to a destination food source, or what does that look like?
It's a great answer, or a great question. I think you always want to put a scrape where it's going to be high traffic. That's why we kind of like relied on these corners. But you're saying you're talking about a guy that doesn't have a buck on camera yet, or a lot of bucks on camera yet. You definitely want to have it in an area that they will be. So if you do have does, I bet you'll have does come in and investigate it. Sometimes we'll even lick and work on it.
Mm-hmm.
But we install them in the timber as well. Timber scrapes can be really effective, but again, it's a little bit harder because fields are just automatically destinations for deer. But if you know where your deer are bedding, I would try to put it in conjunction with bedding on the edge of a bedding area, or in between a bedding area and their food.
So on one episode, or the last recording, there was a mock scrape on the west side of where a buck was bedded.
Mm-hmm.
Was that strategic to have, in terms of setting up this mock scrape for a particular buck to hit it? And then, were you thinking of, we're putting this mock scrape here because we want to hunt this tree on this wind and we think he is there? What are some key takeaways there?
100%. So when we put in a mock scrape, we are constantly thinking about what tree options do we have here. Like we rarely put mock scrapes in places that we can't hang and hunt. So if you've got like a timber that's full of a bunch of like low-lying trees, like hedge that are hard to hang a stand in, etc., and you can't get but 2 or 3 feet off the ground before you're running into limbs, we do not put mock scrapes in areas like those. We put them where we always have an option or 2 options for trees. And what we try to do is we try to forecast and look ahead in the weather pattern. So Garrett and I, you can look ahead 10 days, and I have a wind journal that I break down and that I write in, and then we can go back through and look at old trail camera pictures and see, okay, this deer is walking on wind X. We're going to go and try to set up for this wind, given then that's what he's traveling on. But to answer your question, when we install a mock scrape, we always have a tree or 2 in mind that we could hop in, and we want it to be on a wind that's smart. What I mean by a wind that's smart is we do not set many stands up for east winds because they are rare. Most of our stands are hung up for a northwest wind. So we want our scrape, where we're going to kill that deer, it had better be southeast of our position, and we kill them when they get our wind in the scrape, and we have a shot when they're in our wind or cutting our wind in that mock scrape working, or they're upwind of us to a certain degree. And so we found a lot of luck looking forward in the weather forecast, putting a challenge scrape in like near. And when I say near, I mean if you've got a deer that's using like a 2 or 3 acre area and he's using it hard, we'll try to put one on the fringe of that area that we can get away with for that particular wind. For example, just a couple weeks ago, we found a mock scrape or a natural scrape. We put a challenge scrape next to it to entice the deer, like, who's messing with my territory? And we know that in that particular instance, over that natural scrape, that we're going to need to be able to hunt that on a south wind. So those October days, that are, we're going to get lots of south wind in October because there will be warm fronts in October still. Even in November, there will be days then it's 55 or possibly 60 during the rut. Nobody likes those days. Nobody wants that to happen, but we're prepared for that to happen because at the end of the day, if we have like 5 or 6 options and 5 or 6 deer hitting a scrape, we'll go to the one where we have the best chance, the most consistency, and we can get away with it hunting the wind at that location. So we're always taking the wind and the tree that we're hanging into consideration when we're putting one in.